while it was growing more dangerous, despite the warnings of people like former Secretary of Defense William Perry, who negotiated getting television cameras and inspectors into that reactor. We were safer before President Bush came to office. Now they have the bombs and we're less safe. So what do? We've got to join with the British and the French, with the Germans who've been involved in their initiative. We've got to lead the world now to crack down on proliferation as a whole. But the president's been slow to do that even in Russia. At his pace, it's going to take 13 years to reduce and get a hold of all the loose nuclear material in the former Soviet Union. I've proposed a plan that can capture it and contain it and clean it within 4 years. And the president is moving to the creation of our own bunker-busting nuclear weapon. It's very hard to get other countries to give up their weapons when you're busy developing a new one. I'm going to lead the world in the greatest counter-proliferation effort, and if we have to get tough with Iran, believe me, we will get tough.
Mr. President, minute and a half.
That answer almost made me want to scowl. He keeps talking about let the inspectors do their job. It's naive and dangerous to say that. That's what the Dulfer report showed. He was deceiving the inspectors. Secondly, of course we've been involved with Iran. I fully understand the threat. And that's why we're doing what he suggested we do. Get the Brits, the Germans, and the French to go make it very clear to the Iranians that if they expect to be a party to the world, to give up their nuclear ambitions. We've been doing that. Now, let me talk about North Korea. It is naive and dangerous to take a policy that he suggested the other day, which is to have bilateral relations with North Korea. Remember, he's the person who's accusing me of not acting multilaterally. He now wants to take the six-party talks we have, China, North Korea, South Korea, Russia, Japan, and the United States, and undermine them by having bilateral talks. That's what President Clinton did. He had bilateral talks with the North Korean, and guess what happened? He didn't honor the agreement. He was enriching uranium. That is a bad policy. Of course we're paying attention to these. It's a great question about Iran. That's why in my speech to the Congress I said there's an axis of evil, Iraq, Iran, and North Korea, and we're paying attention to it. And we're making progress.
We're going to move on, Mr. President, with a question for you, and it comes from Daniel Farley. Mr. Farley.
Mr. President, since we continue to police the world, how do you intend to maintain our military presence without reinstituting a draft?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks. I hear there's rumors on the internets that we're going to have a draft. We're not going to have a draft, period. The all-volunteer Army works. It works particularly when we pay our troops well. It works when we make sure they've got housing, like we have done in the last military budgets. An all-volunteer Army is best suited to fight the new wars of the 21st century, which is to be specialized and to find these people as they hide around the world. We don't need mass armies anymore. One of the things we've done is we've taken we're beginning to transform our military. And by that I mean we're moving troops out of Korea and replacing them with more effective weapons. We don't need as much manpower on the Korean Peninsula to keep a deterrent. In Europe, we have massed troops as if the Soviet Union existed and was going to invade into Europe. But those days are over with. And so we're moving troops out of Europe and replacing it with more effective equipment. So to answer your question is, we're withdrawing, not from the world, we're withdrawing, not from the world, we're drawing manpower. So they can be stationed here in America, so there's less rotation, so life is easier on their families, and therefore more likely to be, will be more likely to be able to keep people in the all-volunteer Army. One of the most important things we're doing in this administration is transformation. There's some really interesting technologies. For example, we're flying unmanned vehicles that can send real-time messages back to stations in the United States. That saves manpower and it saves equipment. It also means that we can target things easier and move more quickly, which means we need to be lighter and quicker and more facile and highly trained. Now, forget all this talk about a draft. We're not going to have a draft so long as I'm the president.
Senator Kerry, minute and a half.
Daniel, I don't support a draft, but let me tell you where the President's policies have put us. The President, and this is one of the reasons why I'm very proud in this race to have the support of General John Shalikashvili, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral William Crowe, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Tony McPeak, who ran the air war for the President's father and did a brilliant job supporting me, General Wes Clark, who won the war in Kosovo, supporting me. Because they all, and General Baca, who was the head of the National Guard, supporting me. Why? Because they understand that our military is overextended under the West President. Our Guard and reserves have been turned into almost active duty. You got people doing 2 and 3 rotations. You've got stop-loss policies so people can't get out when they were supposed to. You've got a backdoor draft right now. And a lot of our military are underpaid. These are families that get hurt. It hurts the middle class. It hurts communities because these are our first responders, and they're called up and they're over there, not over here. Now, I'm going to add 40,000 active duty forces to the military, and I'm going to make people feel good about being safe in our military and not overextended, because I'm going to run a foreign policy that actually does what President Reagan did and President Eisenhower did and others. We're going to build alliances. We're not going to go unilaterally. We're not going to go alone like this president did.
Mr. President, let's extend for a minute.
Let me just one point. I got to answer this.
Well, exactly. And with reservists being held on duty.
Let me answer this, what he just said about
Well, I
going
wanted to get
alone.
into the issue
You
of the
tell
backdoor
Tony
draft.
Blair we're going alone. Tell Tony Blair we're going alone. Tell Silvio Berlusconi we're going alone. Tell Alexander Kwasniewski of Poland we're going alone. Got 30 countries there. It denigrates an alliance to say we're going alone, to discount their sacrifices. You cannot lead an alliance if you say, you know, you're going alone. And people listen. They're sacrificing with us.
Senator?
Mr. President, countries are leaving the coalition, not joining. 8 countries have left it. If Missouri, just given the number of people from Missouri are in the military over there today, were a country, it would be the 3rd largest country in the coalition, behind Great Britain and the United States. That's not a grand coalition. 90% of the casualties are American. 90% of the costs are coming out of your pockets. I could do a better job. My plan does a better job. And that's why I'll be a better commander-in-chief.
The next question, Senator Kerry, is for you, and it comes from Ann Bronsing, who I believe is over in this area.
Senator Kerry, we have been fortunate that there have been no further terrorist attacks on American soil since 9/11. Why do you think this is? And if elected, what will you do to assure our safety?
Thank you very much, Ann. I've asked in my security briefings why that is, and I can't go into all the answers, et cetera, but let me say this to you. This president and his administration have told you and all of us, it's not a question of when, it's a question of, not a question of if, it's a question of when. We've been told that. The when, I can't tell you. Between the World Trade Center bombing in, what was it, 1993 or so, and the next time was 5 years, 7 years. These people wait, they'll plan, they plot. I agree with the president that we have to go after them and get them wherever they are. I just think I can do that far more effectively, because the most important weapon in doing that is intelligence. You got to have the best intelligence in the world. And in order to have the best intelligence in the world, to know who the terrorists are and where they are and what they're plotting, you've got to have the best cooperation you've ever had in the world. Now, to go back to your question, Nikki, we're not getting the best cooperation in the world today. We got a whole bunch of countries that pay a price for dealing with the United States of America now. I'm going to change that. And I'm going to put in place a better homeland security effort. Look at it. 95% of our containers coming into this country are not inspected today. When you get on an airplane, your bag is X-rayed, but the cargo hold isn't X-rayed. Do you feel safer? This president in the last debate said, well, that would be a big tax gap if we did that. Ladies and gentlemen, it's his tax plan. He chose a tax cut for the wealthiest Americans over getting that equipment out into the homeland as fast as possible. We have bridges and tunnels that aren't being secured, chemical plants, nuclear plants that aren't secured, hospitals that are overcrowded with their emergency rooms. If we had a disaster today, could they handle it? This president chose a tax cut over homeland security. Wrong choice.
Mr. President.
That's an odd thing to say since we've tripled the Homeland Security budget from $10 to $30 billion. Listen, we'll do everything we can to protect the homeland. My opponent's right. We need good intelligence. It's also a curious thing for him to say since right after 1993 he voted to cut the intelligence budget by $7.5 billion. The best way to defend America in this world we live in is to stay on the offense. We got to be right 100% of the time here at home. And they got to be right once. And that's the reality. And there's a lot of good people working hard. We're doing the best we possibly can to share information. That's why the Patriot Act was important. Patriot Act is vital, by the way. It's a tool that law enforcement now uses to be able to talk between each other. My opponent says he hadn't changed his positions on it. No, but he